Hi folks, hope you're having a great day. So you find me sat opposite the River Dee on the outskirts of Dent in the Yorkshire Dales. And what I'm trying to achieve today is to give you a comparison, kind of contrast and a comparison between the High Dales Way and the Dales Way. Now in terms of describing both of them, I would say the highway is 90 miles and about 14,000 feet of ascent, whereas the Dales Way is 80 miles and about 8,000 feet of ascent. So I'm sure you can pick up from those bits of information that the Dales Way is a lot gentler, kind of meanders through the valleys, over the fields, whereas the highway, not surprising from the description of the title, does stick a lot more to the high moors and crosses through the Yorkshire Dales, and is more in a continuous route north, whereas the Dales Way comes all the way through the Yorkshire Dales and then almost takes like a left turn or heads more to the west to get to the Cumbria and eventually to Windermere. So both routes that I'm reviewing are linear in nature, and therefore you obviously have the challenges of getting to the start and the finish of the particular route. So starting with the High Dales Way, which I actually think is the easiest, is like I say, you start in Saltaire, and getting a rail link from there from Leeds to Saltaire is particularly easy. And when you get to the end and you finish in Appleby-In-Westmorland, again there is a train station. I mean, literally, the trail finishes at the train station. The great thing then is you can get the Carlisle to Cecil Railway, which in England is actually an iconic railway in terms of the best scenery. So you can get the train there and get yourself back to Saltaire very easily. Now, the Dales Way is a little bit more challenging. So the start is easy enough. But then when you finish in Bowness on Windermere, and in fact slightly out of Bowness in Windermere. I think it's half a mile to get to the lake shore where Bowness is. And then it's a mile and a half to get back to the main station at Windermere. And not only have you got the distance, but it's all uphill. You can get a bus at Bowness, and possibly you could get a taxi. But I think most people with a pack, and given the irregularity of the buses, you're probably more likely to have to walk back up the hill. So it's something to be aware of. And in fact, that might convince you to possibly do it in reverse order. So yeah, they're the challenges of getting to the start and the finish on both walks. So in terms of what time of year to do the trails, then clearly with the Dales Way, virtually any time of the year, because it is largely low-lying, whereas the High Dales Way is the complete opposite. You're going across high open moorland, and therefore you want to avoid the worst of the weather if you can. I'd certainly not want to be up there when it's raining and when it's really windy. So you're a bit more restricted on that one. But nonetheless, I did that one in January, but I was lucky by the ground being solid and frozen. So there are alternatives, but I think it's mainly the wind and rain I would want to avoid. Otherwise, a great trail to do. Okay, let's talk about navigation. I always immediately think of signage when I think of navigation with all these types of trails. And I'll say, in various ways, they've got strengths and weaknesses on both trails. And if I was scoring them out of 10, they'll be round about the 7-ish. Now the Dales Way, the advantage they've got is that the signage is really good in Yorkshire, and it's almost kind of instinctive where you're going. It does stick to mainly good paths, and the signage seems to be in all the right places and good places. Also, with the Dales Way, you have these information boards, and I'm stood right next to one now, so I'll show you. So here you go, here's the information board, and there's quite a number of these along the way, so it really helps your planning. So at the moment we're in Dent, which is just here, and as I said, both of the ways go through Dent or around Dent, and it starts in Illkley, this particular one, but the High Dales way also passes through Illkley. The other thing that's worth noting here as well is they've got links going in. So if you didn't want to catch the train from Leeds to Illkley, you could actually walk it. As it says here, for the more energetic, there are 3 link trails: Bradford to Illkley, Leeds to Illkley, and Harrogate to Illkley. So yeah, and it shows here at the end, it finishes in Bowness, but you then have to kind of walk this way to get to Windermere. So they've got the information board on the left, which wouldn't be that useful if you was doing the High Dales way. And it's got a little point here. So yeah, there you go, Dales Highway, and it's pointing that way into the village. You don't necessarily need to go up these steps. If you do it, I'd avoid going up the steps and go on the footpath there. So that badge that I particularly pointed out is fairly consistent throughout. There's just times when maybe there's a few missing, or they're a little bit old and not so easy to spot. But yeah, overall I'd say they're a little bit more consistent, but not the quality of the Dales way in the Yorkshire Dales. So like I say, kind of strengths and weaknesses on both sides, but you can get good guidebooks for both, and I think nearly all the apps certainly have the Dales way, maybe not the High Dales way. Okay, so that's navigation. So what do we have next? I hope you're finding this video useful, and if you do, please subscribe, press the like button, and share with like-minded people, please. So in terms of resupply and water, then in actual fact there's lots of villages that you go through, so it's not really a problem on either of these particular trails. The other thing is with the High Dales way, then because you're going across the moorlands and high moorlands, you do get the odd trickle of streams that you can also utilise, obviously, with filter and boiling the water. So not really a problem at all, in fact very easy. And if you're doing the Dales way, it takes you to the outskirts of Dent, whereas I actually, when I did it, walked into the centre of Dent, because over my shoulder just there is Dent shop, or the stores, and you can carry on through the village, which is really worth doing. And I'll show you a clip of that. It's just such a beautiful village, and you can just carry on and join back onto the Dales way. So don't miss Dent for resupply and just having a look at the village as well. So accommodation, well, I clearly take my own accommodation and like to be wild about it. So yeah, I do wild camping, and I have to say on both trails it was not really a problem. The only possible problem is the start of the Dales way, which, as I mentioned, is fairly flat and therefore more urbanisation. So that first 20 miles you might have to try harder, but I feel confident you would find somewhere. And like I say, I had no problems whatsoever on both of them. And the High Dales way, open moorland, so you're fairly confident you will get somewhere. Of course, I appreciate not everyone is into wild camping, and in fact I'm in Dent at the moment, and behind me here is actually a campsite. I'm not sure you can see it, but just over there's a small tent, and if we look, where is it? Yeah, you can see further down the field there's a caravan. So this is a big site in Dent. So if you make it to Dent, you're not going to have a problem here. And I have seen lots of signs for camping, and I show some of those signs on the videos that I've made, so it's worth checking them out as well. Also, from my research and understanding, and also visiting all the various villages, you're not really going to have a problem with B&B, so you don't necessarily have to sleep in a field for the night. And the other thing is, I did come across someone who had virtually done it as a pub crawl, because there's that many pubs, particularly on the Dales way. So that's another consideration as well. So the acid test is, which one would I do again? Well, that's quite difficult. I think what I would do is do the Dales way to begin with, and then when I get to Dent, where I am today, is then swap over to the Dales Highway and finish in Appleby-In-Westmorland. That way I overcome the transport link difficulties, but also I get the best of both worlds, because that's playing to their strengths, I believe, in terms of splitting it in the way I've just described. Anyhow, I hope you found this useful, and I'd really welcome your comments. Maybe you've done it before, or you've got further questions. I'll be happy to help where I can. Right, on that note, I must go. Thanks for joining me, and hopefully one day I'll see you on the trails. Bye folks.